Hello and welcome to the first GTFO of 2022. It's a brand new year. Happy New Year, Simon Daly.
Happy New Year! Happy New Year to everyone. I'm going to apologise in advance for my croaky voice. I have had a cold over Christmas. I don't feel ill. I just sound like I'm ill. And yeah, it's left me with a bit of a croaky voice. Not COVID, apparently. I've done lateral flow tests
Yeah,
and I have done 2 PCR tests. Not COVID. I swear it's
yeah,
COVID. But
we've had lateral flow tests coming out of our ears, haven't we? And no COVID here apparently, but that's good. That's
no
good. So
COVID, but I sound like it.
well, no, you just sound like you've got a cold. But anyway, enough about your health anxieties. Happy New Year to everybody. As is our want as content marketers, what we do at the beginning of each year is we make predictions and we look forward. And in the world of SEO, which is always changing, there's always something to predict and something to be looking at about what changes might occur, what algorithm updates might happen. 2021 was a year of a lot of algorithm updates, and obviously there are always algorithm updates, aren't there? But the summer particularly of 2021, we had massive update after massive update, and so what 2022 will hold is anybody's guess. But we have picked out 5 things that we think you, as people who own websites, might need to keep your eye on in the coming year. So we have got for you today top 5 SEO tips for 2022. Isn't that right, Simon Daly?
It is right, yes. And by the time this podcast has gone out, I know it'll be going out over Facebook beforehand, but by the time this podcast has gone out, my 30 predictions for SEO in 2022 will be live on Grow Traffic. So go and check that out as well.
Yeah, we'll mention that at the end. You have done a much more detailed blog with many more predictions. But let's get cracking on these. These are our top 5, and there's a little bit of jargon in these, so bear with us because we will explain what each one is. But number 1, more mum, less Bert. So this is a little bit techie, SEO-y, algorithmic. So mum is multitask unified model. This is the new Google search engine algorithm, and it's probably going to phase out and replace BERT, which is the bidirectional encoder representation for transformers. And yes, I had to read that because nobody remembers what the hell BERT stands for. So Simon Daly, why have we got more mum and less BERT in 2022?
This is all about machine learning and an AI and understanding what searcher what is actually looking what they actually mean when they start searching in Google, and it enables them to come up with more complex answers to, or it comes up with answers to more complex questions, put it that way.
Yeah, I mean, it's all AI, isn't it? Artificial intelligence. The last few algorithms have been AI, so they are learning algorithms. They learn as they go. But I think one of the key differences between BERT and mum is that mum is multi-language, isn't it? So whereas, and it's also what's the word?
Across different
Multimedia.
formats, yeah.
Yeah,
Well, that's what it
exactly.
means by multi-language. Is it means that it's across both videos and text and audio. It's considering all of it, images.
Yeah, and 75 languages though, human language, it will consider 75 languages. So the key difference from people as a search point of view, and I think this is really important to remember, that the emphasis of all of these algorithms is on the person doing the search. That is the key priority for Google at all times. So if you are creating content, if you're a website owner, you've got to think about that person who is doing the search, who might then be finding your website. But the key difference for that person is, whereas before you put a search in and you might only get results in one language and you might get mainly text posts. Now you're much more likely to get text and video and images, and it's likely to pull in websites that are not necessarily in your language, somebody else's, and it'll translate them. There was a little bit of a discussion, wasn't there, Dali, around does that mean that multi-language SEO is out? So, you know, if you are a business that operates in different countries, is it still worthwhile having a website in English and a website in French and a website in German, or should you just have one because mum will translate it anyway? I think the thinking, as far as I can tell, is that it's still beneficial to have multi languages. What do you think on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely still beneficial to create content that targets the audience that you are targeting, and that means creating content in the language that they speak.
Mm-hmm.
I don't foresee in the short term, put it that way, that Google will get to the point where it's consistently serving um, foreign language content and translating it in the SERPs. I don't see that happening in the short term, but it may happen in the future. You know, that's it's there as an option for them to do.
Yeah, I don't think it will, because there's a big difference, isn't there, between something that's written in your own language and something that's been translated into your language. As anybody who has tried to have a conversation using Google Translate will know, there's a long way off that there yet, isn't it?
Yeah, one way.
I think one of the other big things that Mum is able to do, though, is comparison searches. So, for example, if you want to know, you know, does Lancashire get more rainfall than Yorkshire? If you put that in as a search term, previously you probably would have had to search for the rainfall in Lancashire and the rainfall in Yorkshire and then compare those two. Whereas now Google is getting much better at understanding those comparison type searches, pulling that together and providing you with that answer. And I think that's a key thing when we're talking, and we will come on to content shortly, but when you're thinking about the types of content that your customers might be needing, some of it might be that kind of comparison type data. Why is your product better to your competitors? Why are you a better service provider than your competitors? Why is this price, you know, why is it one price for this thing and another price for another thing? So that kind of comparison content is becoming much more easily accessible to seekers, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Sorry. Yeah.
Good. Thank you. Thank you. Right. Okay. So that's number one. You know, think about mum rather than Bert. Bert is out the window and mum is in. Number two, top five SEO tips for 2022. Number two, voice search is here. And now we have been talking about voice search for probably 5 years, haven't we? But the prediction now is that by the end of this year, 50% 50% of internet users will be accessing searches using a voice activated search device, whether that be their Alexa or Google Siri, Google Home Assist or Apple Siri. That doesn't necessarily mean 50% of searches. That doesn't mean that everybody will be always using voice search, but 50% of people who have internet access will have access to a voice activated device. And if you are not there with voice search now, this is the year to get there. Simon Daly.
Yeah, I think so. I think that, like you say, we're all using voice search in some ways, and that 50% will just continually grow. Um, I remember I wrote an article about kind of voice search and how it would play into kind of in cars and all the rest of it, and that was about 2012. So this thing's been going on for a long, long time now. But I was reading a blog, I think it was on Google actually, from one of the developers there that was they were saying that whilst exactly what you just said before, you know, whilst there's a big uptake of voice search is unlikely to ever replace the keyboards in terms of you know, getting more kind of complex interactions with the search engine or just generally finding things. So I think there is a case of answering questions and trying to get to the top. But I also think, on the other hand, we can spend a lot of time trying to optimize for something like voice search and not necessarily see huge returns for it.
Do you think it's generational though? Because I mean, when we think about Leon, our son, he's 12. I very, very rarely see him do a type search, whereas I very, very rarely do a voice search because I'm at my laptop most of the time. If I'm not, I've got my phone fairly nearby, so I will tend to use traditional search, whereas he very rarely will. So do you think there is that kind of it'll be a generational shift that'll come through the ranks?
I think there's probably it's technology, isn't it? And how we utilize technology, I suppose, is the different thing.
Mm,
Um, and that's going to change. That changes with kind of as those technologies evolve. So if you look at Leon, our son, then he probably uses his mobile phone to access everything. And so it's a pain in the neck for him to get bogged down with typing things in. If I'm in the car, then I'll use voice search to search for things, or to to search for places. I even use voice search to I even use voice technology to like respond to text messages and things like that
yeah,
now. So
it's not great though because you always seem like you've had a stroke when you use that.
I do, but I think that it's just a demonstration of how, yeah, I'm of a different generation than him, but I use that in a certain context.
Mm,
You're always, or by and large, are glued to your laptop. So
mm,
and when you're on your
that's
phone,
where I use it.
you tend to be listening to information, to podcasts and things like that.
Mm.
So you don't quite use it, I think, in the same way that he does.
No, absolutely not.
Probably not in the way that I do actually either, really, because I
You
do a lot
you
of,
do an awful lot more on your phone than I. Like you work on your
yeah.
phone. I would
I
never
work on
work
my
on my
phone in a
phone.
way that you struggle to do.
Yeah, yeah. Liz has asked a really good question. Is there anything we can do to our content to make it more accessible for voice search? So, I mean, practically speaking, what voice search will do for content, it's less about those kind of short keywords, was 1 2 word phrases. It's more you've got to try and reflect the way people speak, because if they're talking obviously into voice search, they will use full sentences, they will be much longer, they will be much more specific and to the point. They will also be a lot less direct. So we're back to that, Google being able to understand. And if you've ever done training with me, you'll know the example I use. But whereas once upon a time, if we were trying to look up the weather, we might say, "What will the weather be like in Bacup tomorrow?" And that would be a search that we would put in, and Google would know the things that the parameters of the question we're asking. Now we might ask, will I need an umbrella if I go out? Or am I going to need my wellies? We haven't used the word weather. We haven't told it where we are. We haven't mentioned the time frame. And we still expect our search engines to understand and the inferences of that question. And by and large, they will. So that's a lot more about what voice search will do. It won't necessarily be a direct question. It might be completely tangential. I tried to say this word the other day and I
Something like that as
absolutely
well.
couldn't. Yeah, it might go off on a tangent. And you've got to think about that. Now, if you are writing content, that does naturally happen. You tend to do that anyway, but sometimes it might just be worth thinking about your content. What question would somebody be asking if they are trying to reach this piece of content, and just making sure you include those 2 or 3 longer sentences in there, perhaps as your H2s, as your subheadings, just to make sure you're hitting that. If you do want to sort of go back and edit previous blog posts or web pages or whatever, that's a good way to do it. Think about those questions and maybe go in and just edit your headings rather than starting to change the fundamental
But
content.
also make sure that you're concisely answering the questions,
Yeah.
because that's, you know uh, with some of the changes that came in over the course of the last 12 months. I'm thinking really about Passage Update as well as Mum, and Bert 2 years before that, I suppose. That we had tended to, as SEOs, as marketers working with in search engines, we tended to create a piece of content that was a page long that answered a question over the course of the page. But things like the Passage Update and voice search, to some respects, means that you need to kind of cut the waffle
Mm,
and get right down to answering that
mm,
question within a certain paragraph. So it specifically does it, whilst also creating a page of content that still works for the more traditional search.
Yeah, so the general rule of thumb is ask your question, answer it, then you can go off and do your padding and go into a bit more detail. But ask it and answer it first. And also, what's a good tip is read your content out loud, because you've got to remember, yes, people are asking these questions via voice search, but also these devices are reading them back out to people. So make sure your content makes sense when it's read out to somebody. You'd be amazed how often you write something and then you read it back and think, actually, that doesn't sound quite right. You can rewrite it. Liz has said, does that rule out the it depends answer? Yeah, it depends is a really bad answer.
Where
Do
is
not
my
use that one.
klaxon?
I think
Oh,
you've left your klaxon downstairs, haven't you, with
I have.
your new rule? Okay, so moving on. Top 5 SEO tips for 2022. Number 1, more mum, less Bert. Number 2, voice search is here. It is here at last. Number 3, think about AI. AI is massively going to be here. And again, this is something we've been talking about for a few years, isn't it? But AI in terms of the algorithms, which we've already mentioned and how they work, but also AI is here in terms of search results. So your results that you see as the seeker, they are going to become so much more personalized thanks to AI, which brings its own, ethical issues as we all vanish down rabbit holes and end up in echo chambers. But also AI is here in terms of copywriting. You're going to see a hell of a lot more ads, blog posts, all sorts written by AI. It's becoming ubiquitous, isn't it, Dali?
Yeah, I think there is, different kinds of AI that we can talk about here. Absolutely, automation and AI playing together are going to have a big impact. I've seen a lot of ads start to come out that are looking like they're a little bit more AI driven. But they look good. They're perfectly readable and they make sense, and I'm sure that they can convert quite heavily. Google is massively pushing everyone from a Google Ads perspective to start to use things like dynamic search ads and auto turning on some of the auto suggestion features that they've got in the wings. So that's kind of definitely a direction of
How
travel
good
that
are
they're
they?
going in.
Would you recommend people do those, or are
Um,
they not there yet quite?
I don't think that they're there yet, and it depends, doesn't it? It always depends. I've said
It
it.
depends,
Uh,
yeah.
so I was talking to Google yesterday actually about a client that we've got, and they're a great example of a problem that Google has with understanding the difference between um, when a company has uh, two different audiences. One say the user, and one like the middle user, and one the end user, if you like,
Yeah.
and they all use the same terminology to look for, to research, to understand the project or the product or the service. But
Mm.
by giving Google kind of free range, what you end up finding is that they target the people that have got the most searches, and they're not necessarily, or generally, the people that have got the most searches are
Mm.
not the people that have got the money. I
Yeah.
often find.
Yeah, and I think it's like anything, isn't it? AI has its place, and I have seen some really well written pieces of content, ads, all the rest of it. They absolutely hit the mark. I've seen a hell of a lot more that don't and that miss it. I don't know if you've read that obituary that was written by a AI. That's absolutely hilarious. But I think use it where you can, where it's going to be beneficial, but don't, it's not at the point yet where we can let AI run and without some human checks, because it's just not that good yet, is it? But it's coming, and it's coming fast. And I mean, we've been talking about it probably 2-3 years. It's been seriously on the radar, and in that time, I mean, I remember when we first started having a conversation about AI written copy, and it was appalling, and that was probably 2 years ago, and
It
just
was
in
it
that short space of
believe
time.
believe it or not, Rachel, we started looking at AI written content 5 or 6 years ago.
Right. Time
That's
flies.
that's when we first kind of tried to use some. I remember there's two blogs on Grow Traffic, or maybe three, that are written using AI software as an experiment from
Mm.
about that time.
Okay. Right. So, top 5 tips. Number 1, more mum, less Bert. Number 2, voice search is here. Number 3, think about AI. Think about how you can start using it. Where might it be helpful? But keep a check and balance on it. Number 4, multimedia content and images, optimized images. Now we've already kind of touched on this because we've explained how mum is much more focused on using multimedia and all these different types of content. So we've mentioned that. I've got really bad feedback and it's really distracting me. Oh, I think it stopped. It stopped. It's okay. We can concentrate again. But also, images are becoming so much more important, not just because of things like Instagram and TikTok, but videos as well for TikTok. But also because people are accessing things on their phones, they want quicker, more easy to digest content. The days where people sit and read long blog posts are kind of gone. That doesn't mean that those blog posts need to go, but we've got to think about how people are consuming content. And it's much more about little explainer videos, images, infographics, augmented reality. Again, back to AI, augmented reality is going to be a massive thing. If you think about people are looking up stuff whilst they are somewhere with their phone, how is augmented reality going to help explain your business and what you do and how you can benefit them? But also, just again, optimized images, making the internet more accessible. All of these things are more and more important again, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, there's a number of things that are coming in with multimedia. I think the obvious one is short form videos, like you've mentioned. There's absolutely no way that short form videos aren't going to continue to rise and become a dominant force. Just recently, TikTok became the most visited website, overtaking Google, which Google's been that website for many years, which is quite a feat considering that TikTok was only launched really a few years ago after the little merger. But there's a number of things that are happening that we need to think about as SEOs. So there's the clip markup that can be put into videos. There's the seek markup that needs to be put into videos, and this is a bit like passage ranking on pages. It's how Google can interpret those videos and find specific points within the video to land people on. So it's giving them the right content at the right time. There's also a number of new image formats that we should be starting to implement, not just relying on PNGs and JPEGs, but, really starting to use some of the new formats. We should be also thinking about some of the optimizations of images. I think that's going to be increasingly important. The number of times that I come across websites where people have just got an image and the name of that image is something like 1 2 3 4 5 Olympus or whatever. I don't even know if Olympus make cameras anymore, but 1 2 3 4 5 Nikon took this photo, and there's no description, there's no further information about what that picture's all about. So it's all about all those kind of the meta layers that you can get into your multimedia.
And can I
Audiobooks as well,
just saying on that front on images, optimizing images. I mean, really, the kind of all the messaging at the moment on the SEO forums and stuff is that's the most important thing you can do. Get your images optimized on your website, because that is so crucial now, and it is about accessibility. But yeah, make sure your keyword is in there. It's a proper description, all the rest of it. That is going to absolutely pay dividends. And I just think back to that, what you were saying about images. I mean, Liz obviously has picked up on this, but people's smartphones are so much better than they ever were, and a lot of people now are accessing things on their smartphones. The old if you've got a website and you've got really old pixelated images on it, it's not going to cut it anymore. Now is the year. Get those photos updated. Make sure they are good, high quality images. Again, make sure you've got the little videos and stuff on there. Those old sort of formats and resolutions and all the rest of it, they're just not good enough in 2022, are they?
No, and the optimization, it is about keywords. It is about moment. It's also thinking about some of the kind of dialogue things that Google's been talking about, but also speed. That's a and I know we talk about core experience, web
Core Web
experience
Vitals.
factors, web core vitals. Um, and it's all playing into that as well. Optimizing images, and this is why we're saying that the old formats like JPEGs and PNGs, they're going to have to go because they're not small enough. If you try to make them small enough, you lose all the uh, sharpness of them.
Quality
What's the
resolution,
word?
yeah. Yeah,
Resolution all kind of drops
resolution.
off. So we need to be looking at things like the WebP formats that Google's pushing at the moment, and getting all images moving in that direction.
Yeah, speed is crucial, isn't it? I mean, I personally now I was looking for something the other day, and a website probably took 3 seconds to load, and by that point I was bored. And then when it finally did load, a pop-up came up, and I was like, nope. I left and I went. And people have. I was reading an article the other day that said we have lost all ability to have an attention span, but we expect fast, and we expect a smooth user experience and all the rest of it. There's no patience left for people to sit around and wait for your website to load. So absolutely, optimize those images and get it so that it loads quick. Okay, I'm moving us on because time is marching on. Top 5 SEO tips for 2022. Number 1, more mum, less Bert. Number 2, voice search is here. Number 3, AI in all of its different formats, but think about AI. Number 4, create great multimedia content and make sure it is optimized. And number 5, mobile first indexing. I mean, we've mentioned it already, haven't we? And again, this is something we've been talking about for ages. This is not new, but people are accessing the internet on their phones, and it needs to be quick, and it needs to be smooth, and all of those core web vitals stuff, everything we've just said, isn't it, Dali?
Yeah, I think we've been saying this for so long now. It kind of goes without saying in some ways that um, technology is has got to be. Whilst many of us still sit in front of a laptop to work, often we're multi-screening. We're doing things on mobile phones. We're doing things on laptops. We expect to be able to transfer something that you're working on from one mobile phone, from your laptop to your mobile phone. You expect to be able to use it when you're out and about. It needs to be fast, and that's really driving the kind of changes online, and it's driven a lot of changes to search over the years in terms of the mobile first index, which kind of came out the best part of 5 years ago now, I think.
Yeah.
And but also it's changed the kind of image technology that we were just talking about. It's changed speed on the internet. It's changed security. It's having massive impacts, and that's not going to go anywhere. It's just going to kind of carry on as mobile phone technology kind of comes on and improves, I think.
I think that's a really important thing to mention, isn't it? That moving from device to device, and that is so crucial now. Somebody sent me a podcast to listen to the other day, and I tried to get it on my laptop first because they'd emailed me the link. So I thought I'll open it there. But as soon as you went off that tab, it stopped playing. So I thought, all right, no, I'll listen to it on my phone whilst I'm working on my laptop. And the website was not optimized for mobile. Then I was like trying to zoom in and put that thing in. People now expect to be able to move smoothly. They want to maybe do a bit of research. If you're buying some garden furniture, do a quick search on your phone. Right, I've seen what I want. Let me move to my laptop now to do a bit more research or whatever. That ability for things, websites, business websites, consumer websites, all the rest of it, to be available to people wherever they want it, whenever they want it, very quickly. It's so important. And like I say, the expectation is there now that we can do that. And if you encounter a website where you can't do that, you will be moving to somebody else. Yeah. Okay, great.
Sorry, was that a question, Mara?
Well, it was
Yes.
a rhetorical question. It was a rhetorical question.
Yes, absolutely. You're absolutely correct.
I am. Thank you. I am. Right. There we go. That is it. So we are out of time. So our top 5 SEO tips for 2022 are more mum, less Bert. Number 2, voice search is here. Number 3, AI. Think about AI algorithms, voice search results. What?
I can't believe we talked about AI and we didn't talk about Lambda.
Yeah. Well,
Lambda.
Lambda is it's a category of exhaust fumes. Lambda, you have to pass your Lambda test to get your MOT.
But Lambda is
very
just really quickly, it's the kind of next step of BERT, really understanding dialogue.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Number 4. Create great content as ever, but it should be multimedia content. It should be really well optimized. It should go without saying, but it never does. And number 5, think about, mobile first index. Think about how people are using their devices and make sure your website and your content is available to them where they are and when they need it. That is it. If you would like to read Simon Daly's 50 gazillion predictions for SEO in 2022, 30 predictions.
Again.
It will be on the Grow Traffic website, www.growtraffic.co.uk, very shortly. Thank you to those who have watched this as a Facebook Live, and thank you to Liz, as ever, for contributing. If you are listening to this as a podcast, please rate and review us because it helps other people find us. And if you are watching on YouTube, subscribe below, guys. That is it. We will be back next week with a deep dive into an SEO project for 2022. In the meantime, Simon Daly, any final thoughts? You are.
No. Have I any final thoughts? No, I'm going to go and drink some Lemsip and see if that'll clear my throat a little bit.
Yeah, okay. Well, I mean, it won't because you've been sounding like this for about 2 weeks, but there we go.
Sexy,
thank
you.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course it is.
Thank you very much.
Right. Thank you very much. On that note, we're leaving. Wave.